Calvin Castine in Altona, something I haven't said for a couple of weeks now, but I get to say it all over again. And we're talking about the same thing I was talking about last time I was here. We're talking about the forest fire at the Altona Flat Rock area, and that started, I believe, on the 12th day of July. Today's the 8th day of August, so it's almost a month ago, at least coming on, I think it'll be 4 weeks tomorrow probably. That was on a Thursday. And we got two people that I tried very hard to talk to on that first day, but they kept saying they were busy. I don't know what what kept them busy, just a little fire going on. But we got. Little fire. I'll let you introduce yourselves and your titles.
Eric Day, Director of Emergency Services for Clinton County.
Greg Spinner, Altona Fire Chief.
All right. Greg was going to talk to me, and he said, let me put on my official fire chief jacket here. And after he did that, he never got another moment,
gone,
never another free moment. I said at the time that when I came here that I think it was sometime between 12 and 12:30. I was just going to head inside at my home in the Ridge Road in Champlain to have lunch, and I happened to be looking out in this direction, and I saw a big cloud of white smoke, and I said, "I wonder where that's coming from. Somebody shouldn't be burning brush today." It was a long dry spell that we were in the middle of. And after I had lunch, I went to my computer, got on Facebook, and some guy, I think it was Larry Musso, had posted, I guess he must have a scanner or something, but he was posting that the people were coming into Altona because of the fire. So I said, well, maybe I should take a closer look. I took another look at the smoke, and I said I better get there. So that I came here, but without Facebook, I wouldn't have got here that first day.
Oh, there you go. Social media works again.
Social media comes through. So who got the call? Who called it in?
Well, I was at my desk at work, and I got a text from one of my assistant chiefs, Jason Myatt, and
He's in
who
the
took
area,
off.
but
Yeah,
he just took off.
and it was a picture of the Brunel Road looking up at the rock and the smoke, and it needed no explanation. There was no explanation, it was just a photo. And that was at 12:44 on Thursday. And shortly thereafter, he had called me, but I was already moving at that point and making some calls on the radio and checking with dispatch. They called miners to make sure that they were not doing anything up there as far as burns. And dispatch also told me they were getting several calls on it. So I said, start calling some departments, and that's how I was notified.
Okay, and of course you've got a day job in Plattsburgh. So how soon were you able to get down here?
I was pretty quick. Actually, I didn't even check with my boss. I just started moving. So I called him later, and he's very understanding and thankful for that. So as soon as I got that text from Jason, I was moving.
Okay, and Eric, this is your day job. So when did you get the word?
Well, I was sitting in my office at the time working on a radio upgrade project we're trying to do countywide, and had my pager open, scanner on in there, so I tend to, when I'm working, tend to try to listen to just about everything that's going on. And I heard them page Altona Fire for a report of somebody seeing smoke in the area of the Flat Rock, you know, not an uncommon occurrence to have people reporting seeing smoke. So I didn't jump right out of my chair, but had thought then initially that that might not be good. Kept right on working, but from that point on, started listening and hearing, you know, more departments being moved, and a few more departments being moved, and listened to the guys on the radio doing a little bit of work. And then it wasn't too long after that my own department got called from South Plattsburgh. So I went down to the firehouse there to make sure things were moving. We had guys going, and really, actually, that first day, I came up here with a South Plattsburgh truck initially, and came up to work. As far as in the fire, not realizing that it was as big as it was. But that had to be about 3:30, I think, was probably about when I got here. 3:30, 3:45 maybe. Somewhere in that range.
Okay, and Eric, you were, as the fire chief, you were in charge, and I know it was creeping toward the West Shazy area. And you were hoping that Dave Lucia would have to take over.
Well, that was my running joke. I said, yeah, you know, a couple more hours, it's not going to be my problem anymore. It's going to be Kevin Gerard, the fire chief in West Shazy's problem. But that's not actually how it works. But that was kind of how we were talking.
Yeah, you got to try to.
The last time we had any significant fire, it was on that side. It was on the West Shazy side. And it was their lead, even though we had a lot of departments for that event too. Wasn't anywhere near this size, but
Well, I imagine if it started in the right place, you'd have to use GPS or something to figure out whose responsibility it was.
yeah, honestly, 911, the 911 system works pretty well these days, and we can tell where people, if they're calling, saying the fire's right in front of me, works pretty well. Cellular telephones these days work pretty well as well. If they call, we can generally get location data in the form of coordinates, which pop up on a map, and on that map we can tell where you are. But when somebody calls and says they can see smoke off in a wild area, wilderness area, yeah, sometimes we don't really know exactly where it is, and I think that's some of the problem initially with this fire, was trying to figure out where it was. It was a lot of what's the best way to get to it? We know it's over there, but what's the best way to get to it? What road are we going on? Do we go the rock road? Do we go this way? Let me find another way to get in front of it. It's a lot different than somebody calling and saying there's a fire in the backyard behind,
Yeah.
123 whatever street, or a car accident in front of Walmart. A lot easier to find.
Yeah, I mean, you even when you got back there, you took the Brunel Road to the end, and you weren't at the fire yet. You had to, and it was which path you had to go down to get there, because I know walking back there, I twisted and turned several times before I got to where it was.
Yeah, the good thing is that with the locals, that with the assistant chief that was first on scene, he knows where he's going back there, and he was radioing back to me, this is where you got to be, and using different reference points where I knew where it was. And to get back to the other thing, if it's in between West Shazy and Altona with the mutual aid program, West Shazy is going to get called out anyway. So all these departments that are in that proximity are going to be dispatched.
Yeah, these days, in our county and in most of the rural counties in New York State, having had a conversation about this just this morning with a counterpart from Chautauqua County, way out on the west end of New York State. We're all working together these days to deal with most any incident that's any significance. So it's not usually a dispute over whose it is. It's bring enough people to help us out.
Yeah, well, I mean, but somebody's got to be the ultimate person to call the shot, though.
Well, that's true.
Everybody's going to make a slight difference in how they might approach or attack something, so somebody's got to be the one making that decision. And there are a lot of departments that showed up here. That mutual aid system really kicked in that day.
For sure.
Vermont was here, Southern Quebec was here. There weren't too many. The fire departments that weren't here were on standby, I'm sure, somewhere else.
They were ready to go, absolutely. The rest of the county, and then even some from Franklin County the second day, certainly, and then
second day,
and we worked into Essex County eventually as well. As far as who's in charge on a big incident like that, I mean, ultimately the law says it's the fire chief in the jurisdiction of his authority. Or her authority. However, generally, again, we keep talking about this mutual aid system and how well it works. Generally, most of the departments really have no problem if somebody, a chief or an officer from another department is there first and establishes the title of command. We don't generally fight over it. So that's not really a problem. And you're right, different people have different tactics, and based on experience, different ways of going about things, and may have learned to do something different through the School of Hard Knocks versus somebody newer. But we generally work pretty well together and get the job done. So and don't have too many fights about it along the way.
Well, and another thing with this fire is it's spreading. So where it was when it started isn't necessarily where it is now, because that spot's already burnt.
That's correct.
So you've got to be, figuring out which way the wind is blowing. The fire is going to create its own wind. So all of a sudden you know where it was, but you don't know where it is or where it's going. So you've got to be able to attack there and have a plan.
Correct. Yeah.
I think one of the things that surprised me early on, again, I think I got there about 3:30. By 4:30, we had a conversation about trying to get a helicopter from Homeland Security or somebody to get overhead to look at it before the Rangers had gotten there, to see which way it was going, how big it was, gain some more intelligence from the air. And ultimately was able to get in contact with the Homeland Security Air Branch in Plattsburgh, who didn't have any helicopters available that day. However, they had a fixed-wing aircraft, and were overhead pretty quickly.
Right.
And within 5 minutes of being overhead, had actually texted from the plane, texted me a picture to my cell phone, a picture of their screen in the plane where they had mapped out the perimeter of the fire and said that it was over 60 acres.
Already?
And that was at 4 o'clock.
Right.
And it in 3 hours, 3.5 hours, had grown to 60 acres. We're like, wow, this is big, and it's going to get bigger. And sure
Yeah.
enough, it did.
Yeah, when we compare with what's happening out west right now, this seems kind of insignificant, but it surely isn't insignificant when it's in your backyard and you don't know how much it's going to grow. And we just went through with that period. We were still in the middle of a very dry spell. The ground was very much ready for a fire. Excuse me. And the very growth that is in there is very conducive to being burnt. It's just a lot of low stuff to the ground that just kind of grows a little bit and dries out and dies. And
Lives quite well with very little bit of water that it can get on that rocky surface. So it's prime for burning.
yeah, and it's prime for spreading too, because it's got that
Yep.
nice flat rock, and it just
Conditions were such that day and the next few days with the humidity being relatively low, temperatures high, and some breeze to move the fire. So they put all those things together, and the dry fuels, and that's good conditions for a fire to start and grow. We haven't had any this year, but the National Weather Service will issue a red flag warning, which is, we hear all the time about, a severe weather alert and, winter weather advisory and all those advisories and alerts that the National Weather puts out. During this time of year, they'll put out alerts, red flag warnings for times when it's very dry, when the humidity is below a certain amount, when the temperature is up, and when there'll be winds. And on those days, conditions are actually even more conducive than we experienced over the week that we were involved with this fire. Last summer we had two, I think, if I remember correctly, two red flag days where they issued those.
2017.
And in 2017, and there have been some more, but they haven't had any this year. One of the things we talk about with the fire service is that when you see that red flag warning thing, if you have a fire somewhere, the concern with red flag is that they're telling you that conditions are such the fire will grow way faster than you might experience on any other day. And I would say we were close to it those days, not there, but close.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you were in charge, Greg, and I know there are a lot of people. I know Chris Trombley. I remember you were there, Eric. Other people from the county were there helping out. You guys were looking at maps. You had forest rangers that showed up. So you kind of look at those things and kind of decide where you're going to attack. Is that what was going on?
Oh, for sure. The county, the deputy coordinators bring a lot to the table as far as knowledge and being able to pull in resources. And obviously, when the rangers get there, it's still Altona's fire, and unfortunately, I'm still in charge. But the rangers are there, and we do a unified command, set up a unified command, and that's what they do. So we kind of work with them, and you tell us what you guys need, and we provide that for them, and work side by side with them.
Now, so part of this, where the fire was, I think of that flat rock, and I think of Minor Foundation owning it. Who owns the, where Minor doesn't own? Is it the state land? What is it?
Yeah. Basically, there was a private landowner involved later on, but initially it was the state and Minor Institute property. Yes.
Okay. And of course, that would facilitate the forest rangers being here. Would they have shown up anyway if it hadn't been on state land?
Absolutely. Yeah, we would have called them.
Yeah, we'll at the request of the incident commander or a fire chief, anytime there's a fire that's wooded, wildland, whatever term we want to use, if there's a request for the rangers, we'll call and they'll come. So they've on a number of occasions helped us fight fires on private property, or state land, or both, combinations. So
Yeah, well, we're in the Northern Adirondack School District, but I don't think there's any real, there's maybe Rand Hill, but there's no real mountains in Altona.
Yeah.
So, do the forest rangers come up here very often, to your knowledge? Are they up here very much?
For fires or
No, just for
other
routine.
things? Well, unfortunately, people do get lost in the woods for hunting, and
But for normal day, unless there's something going on?
I wouldn't think they would be up here patrolling necessarily. They were actually on another search when this thing broke out, so they were out in Paul Smith's, and a lot of them were there and came here.
There are 2 rangers assigned to the northern part of Clinton County. So the statewide rangers have a patrol area, and they patrol that territory that they're assigned to. So they probably come through here, but on a day-to-day basis, no, not so much. They do have a very good understanding of the areas, the backwoods and wildlands areas that's within their patrol area. Dave Russell, who acted with Greg as part of the Unified Command group throughout the event here, was also part of the Unified Command for the search in Ellenburg on Thanksgiving on 2016 for Mr. Boardman 2 years ago, and Dave knew that property. That was all private property. Where Mr. Boardman's property was and some neighbors, there was state property adjacent to it. But Dave knew that like the back of his hand. You knew he'd walked in there and patrolled the woods routinely. I mean, he knew where the swamps were. He knew he'd been in there before. And I got to believe these guys that are assigned to this area, they've been on the rock and know the area very well. So.
Well, there probably aren't too many people from teenage years on up who have lived in Altona for a while who don't know that area, Greg.
Exactly, yeah, correct. Mm-hmm.
At this point in time, one of the first questions I kept hearing was, how did it start? How did it start? Have we made a final determination on that?
To the best of my knowledge, it's still under investigation. I'm not saying that they may have a good idea, but,
They haven't confirmed that.
correct.
And so
Correct.
this is what.
Yeah.
So it's always important to know how these things started, so you can hopefully avoid something like that happening again, because it's very easy. Somebody, doing something what they consider very routine could all of a sudden get out of hand. And
Sure. And an accidental cause is certainly a possibility. I don't know that this was malicious, but obviously investigating a fire because of the possibility of a malicious incendiary cause is important as well. The expense of this event was considerable. And if it's accidental, it's accidental, and the expense gets absorbed. And if it's not, then the responsible party is somebody you might want to talk to.
they better have deep pockets, huh? 'Cause that's a lot of money spent on.
It was an expensive event for sure.
Yeah, it's just, and I don't, I want to keep talking about the firefighters and the response, but I look inside that building right there, I'm looking at the fire station, and I got to make sure that I mention the auxiliary. They put in probably more hours than the average firefighter did. They were here, around, first thing in the morning, last thing at night, the same people.
Yep, for sure. On a limited crew, I think there was 6 of the auxiliary members, and there were some other people that came in and helped, some other firefighters' wives and so on and so forth, but that was an impressive, from Thursday afternoon, right through till Tuesday. Dinner was the last dinner that they served on their own, and very impressive feat by a handful of people, for sure.
It was amazing. And the response of the community, the individuals and the businesses that just, I look in there and there's just piles of food and beverages. It's just amazing. That was what was poured out to support you guys.
Yep, very impressive, and thank everybody. It's nice to live in a small town, I guess, and you realize that when something like this happens and the people come out. And we were trying to get everybody's name, to maybe thank them later on, but people didn't want the recognition. They just brought in water or Gatorade or whatever that they brought in and didn't want to give their name. So it was very nice. Actually started to tell people, make sure you check before you go out and buy something now, because you don't want to turn away anything, but you don't want anything to spoil or go bad either. So
Yeah.
very nice.
Make sure it's something that's needed at that particular, it's needed, but and maybe it's needed tomorrow and not today.
Bigger incidents such as this, or probably more so incidents that are even larger, or if this had extended on longer, the whole job of managing donations becomes a job in itself, and requires people to deal with it. I wasn't directly involved on 9/11 with any of the response in New York City, but we had people from Clinton County that were down there, and I work with some folks at the state level and some of the other counties that were, and I've heard stories of the disaster within the disaster, and that was donations, and there you had obviously something far larger than anything we had here, but you had a worldwide network of people donating stuff, and it was just showing up in Lower Manhattan and piling up on the sidewalks and piling up in the streets, and it becomes in that case, a disaster within a disaster. Here, there were tons of donations, and it was well managed and well handled, and it wasn't so big that it couldn't be dealt with. So kudos to the people that were in here dealing with it and taking care of supplying everybody out working and feeding, and thank you to those folks that brought donations in.
Yeah, and I look back at 9/11, and I know there were a lot of fundraising things that went on nationwide that were personal gain, and that kind of marred
You
what
wonder.
step,
Yeah,
millions of dollars that, because everybody was just feeling they needed to help out, so they weren't doing their homework as far as who they were donating to, and
Correct. And that certainly is a problem. And obviously with this event, that nothing like that was going on. I think everybody was very thankful for everything that folks were able to bring up.
definitely, just incredible. Now, day one, what time did day one end for you guys? I know what I was concerned about when it got to be dark, what happened, but it seemed like the fire kind of cooperated overnight. It didn't really spread like you would expect it might be able to.
The decision was made to pull people out of the woods. There's no sense of getting anybody hurt or injured. You walk back there, you know what it's like in the daytime, let alone at night. So, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the fire behavior usually lays down a little bit at night.
Depending on the atmospheric conditions, typically at night, wildfire like that will tend to slow down. Again, it all depends on humidity. You get typically higher humidity in the evening, so things are a little more moist, and it just slows everything down a little bit. Winds will tend to die down. Of course, we have had dry, windy nights too. But in this case, the weather was in our favor, and that first night it slowed down. I don't know if you left when I did. I think I left. I think on day one ended for me at about 2:00 in the morning on day two. It was early in the morning the next day when I left here.
Well,
Anyway.
now you're making me feel bad, 'cause I think I left earlier.
I think you were here almost.
No, I was a couple hours of sleep and back at it the next day.
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
Yeah. Now you have a real job.
Yes.
I'm not saying you don't have a real job, but
I know what you mean. Yeah, I can differentiate.
you have a real job, and I think I might have mentioned in one of my videos when I started at Sheridan Iron Works in the village of Champlain in 1966. John Zerlo's father, was the plant manager, and fire alarm would go, and certain guys would leave their machines or the assembly floor and head out the door. Second alarm, third alarm, fourth alarm. Without the people that worked at Sheridan, you went to put a fire out in Champlain back in the 60s and early 70s.
Yep.
But you don't have that local employment anymore like some communities used to have. So it's kind of tough sometimes, and your employer has got to be kind of understandable when you say, I'm going to be fire chief. You've got to kind of clear it with the boss first, I would imagine.
Yeah, my boss told me, even before I was chief, years ago, he said, if you need to go, then just make sure that your department is covered with your fellow employees, and and go do what you need to do. And even if you said if you're up all night fighting fire, and you got to take the next day off or come in late because you got to sleep in, just go ahead and do it. And he's always been understanding like that. So, and that's Thursday night sometime I, sent him a text, said, hey, I'm going to be here for a couple of days, and he said, no problem, just do what you need to do.
All right, probably ought to mention your employer then.
That would be Knight Automotive, Knight Buick GMC. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. I knew that, but I
Yeah.
wanted to give them credit for that. So I know when I came back on Friday, all of a sudden you had a co-leaders because is it raining here as we're talking?
Yeah,
it sounds like
we got a little rain hitting the roof.
all right.
Yep.
That is very appropriate. We're getting rain here. It's rained a little bit since the forest fire, but and the grass has turned a little bit greener, but it was still kind of dry out there. At what point did the Forest Ranger Service become your co-captains?
I would say Thursday night we had a couple of Rangers, and at that point, this is how we're going to do this. And then definitely by Friday, like you said, you saw the trailers rolling here, and again, that's what they do. They have the resources, and so yeah, as early as Thursday night, Unified Command was definitely set up.
Okay, and what's the law on that, Eric? What's the legality of, so you're not doing something and assuming that you're doing it right, that, that you're doing it the way it's supposed to be done, you say, well, I thought they were co-s in charge, and they said, no, we weren't, so.
Well,
So-
that evening, as Greg mentioned, there were a couple of Rangers here early in the evening on Thursday, and we got together with Greg, myself, and a few others, and had a conversation about what was going on, what was being done, and let's go back to the firehouse and set up the plan for tomorrow, because this is a pretty good sized incident, and the creation of what we've talked about before of unified command. The discussion of that is right there, right then and there. Generally speaking, with first response agencies, there's tends to be a lead agency depending on the type of incident. The fire department might respond to, and I'm hypothetical situations here, but the fire department might respond to a bank robbery because there was smoke in the building, or somebody pulled a fire alarm to evacuate the bank, but there was a robbery there. The fire department is going to work in unison with the police department. The police department's the lead agency. We go to a house fire, law enforcement may be there because we need to identify individuals or look for the people that we may not be able to find them in the home. Well, let's find them, where are they? So we use law enforcement for that. But they're going, they defer to the fire chief as the authority and in charge. There still is the term unified command because police and fire are together at both of those. In this case, with a forest fire, as we said, the forest rangers, New York State Forest Rangers have got the training and experience for dealing with that. Not that the folks in Altona or any of the other local fire departments don't have experience or knowledge or equipment, but that's different than what we do on an everyday basis on the street. And so when they're here and we're here, we get together in a unified group, and they tend to lead the charge, even though ultimately it's still in Altona and Greg is the fire chief. But we pull together and pool our resources, and their tactics for dealing with that are they're different than what we do every day. So
Yeah,
we run with them.
Yeah, and New York State people, of course, have responded to catastrophes like that out in other states. So when they're going out and fighting a fire in Colorado or California or wherever, it's good training for them for when they come back here and something happens here in New York State.
Yeah, without question. Many of those guys that were here, guys and gals that were here from the State Forest Rangers, have been on fires out west, and I think that the state promotes their members doing that to gain that experience. So when they do come back here, there's there is that knowledge base to apply. We had the Forest Rangers here. There were also a number of other state agencies that come along with incident management of a growing incident like that. So when you want to put 150 people in the woods to work tomorrow, there's a fair amount of planning and paperwork to build the documentation so that it can be presented the next morning to brief everybody, and then have a record of what happened that day and who worked where and who's working for who. And you know, it's one thing for when Altona and West Shazy get together at a fire. You know, Dave knows you know, Dave knows Bill, and you know, Bill knows Greg, and everybody knows Eric, and we all work together. In this case, with all these other folks coming in, you know, I know that's a forest ranger, but I don't know who it is.
Yeah.
So hey, where's the plan that says who I'm working for? And a lot of coordination. So there was a whole lot of other folks here with this, we'll call an incident management team that was brought in along with the rangers. That at first sometimes seems kind of cumbersome to say, what are all these people doing here? Why are we doing this? And you know, where do I fit into this? And after a day or so of it, then it starts to make sense, and it starts to make the whole thing flow. And we did the same process with the boardman search with the rangers, and it works. And that's that whole incident management process is something that we learn locally and nationwide by presidential decree. We're all supposed to train in it. We don't get to use it so much locally, at least not on a larger scale like that. But
You're not complaining.
Not complaining a bit, not complaining one bit. But when you do become a part of it,
Yeah.
it's good experience. Where I was going with all of that is this incident management process actually is something born out of the West Coast and large wildfires. You know, it wasn't 9/11. It wasn't you know, dealing with a house fire in you know, New England or in you know, the southeast United States. It was wildfires in the West. They built this process up and how to manage it. So that comes back with them as well.
Yeah, it's important that you don't have to reinvent the wheel when something like this happens. If somebody's already invented that wheel, let's see what their procedure is, and let's use it and learn from it.
There's a preset list of job titles and who, you know, in duties under each of the job titles, and the job title may not make any sense at all for, you know, Altona Fire Department going by themselves to a small fire in the back of the house. But when you start bringing in all these other players, oh, I know that guy does this and this and this. Oh, if I need that, I go see that guy, and you know, you basically start to build up your own little your own little structure.
At any point in time, you had departments, as we mentioned, from Franklin County, southern Quebec, western Vermont, and all of northeastern Clinton County, and any Essex County fire departments. I know there were some prison workers here and so on.
Yep. Mariah Shock. There were work crews from the Mariah Shock facility. At least a week, at least two crews a day for a week. And those crews were 25
I know they had quite a
inmates.
few buses there.
They put some work out. There were Essex County fire departments as well. Schroon Lake. Who else did I see
Not
up
that
here?
far away.
Ticonderoga. Yeah, there were a number of them.
Yeah, and you know, and I know Aquasasne was here with some big equipment
Yeah.
and so on. And at what point do you say, well, this is how many people we need today, and we don't need, you know, 30 extra people today, then be short tomorrow? How do you kind of man that? I mean, if they want to send 10 firefighters from such and such a station, what do you, and you know, how do you handle the number from each?
That's a little bit of a challenge with the process. So in the morning, the Rangers held a briefing, and there's, you know, 125, 150 people, however many there are here.
Right.
Everybody's here. Everybody gets the briefing, and then those that are going out on the fire line load up, go out, go to work in their divisions for their division supervisors, and then their crew boss for each of the crews under the division supervisors. As the day wears on, the division supervisors, and in this case we had there were two divisions, A and Z, the west and the east. There was a supervisor in the field on each side. They talk with their crew bosses, and there's interaction back and forth as to how progress is being made. Are we getting our objectives done for the day? Are we, you know, slower? Are we fast? Are we going to be done what we wanted to? What do we need for tomorrow? and then those division supervisors come back and communicate with the operations section chief, who is in this case was a forest ranger, and they sit down and throughout the early afternoon, midday, talk about how things are going and what does it look like, and try to project where, their goal was to get to here today. Are we going to get there, or are we going to be beyond it? And then there's a couple of meetings that those folks in the incident command staff will sit in on, with some people that do logistics, which are the folks that call up the other fire departments, and that's kind of where our office comes into play. Few meetings throughout the day, and then at the end of there's a planning meeting. That's the last meeting of the day, I guess, which is more of a formality. But the end of that planning process, the tactics come out for the next day. Here's what we want to do. Here's where we want to go, and here's how much stuff we need. We need 4 brush trucks, or we need 15 brush trucks, and we need 3 UTVs, and we want 4 tankers, and they give this sheet with this list on it, and that's kind of where our role really falls into place at the fire coordinator's office or emergency services for the county, because we know all the local resources. So they give us a shopping list, and then we start making phone calls and putting pages out, and polling or canvassing for anybody. Hey, any department available to bring a brush truck tomorrow? Call Kelly Donahue back, or call the dispatch.
I know Kelly was sitting in here for
a couple of days when he was the guy with the hot seat. Mike Cahoon from Shazy is a deputy fire coordinator. He's the fire chief over there. But Mike and Chris did it a couple of days. I did it a couple of days. Rick Akey. But you end up trying to fill that shopping list of resources, and the resources they ask for. It kind of goes as an unwritten thing that if you're looking for a brush truck, you're looking for 2 or 3 firefighters. If you're looking for a tanker, you're looking for 1 or 2.
Right.
If they want an engine crew to stand by here or up where the helicopter was at the LZ, an engine crew is 4 to 5, 6 guys. So when the Rangers order a number of brush trucks, they know that if it comes with 2 or 3 guys, each one comes with 2 or 3, and they need 18, they're going to order 9 trucks. So that's where we get to the number of people. When we call out and ask, of course, you call a fire department and they'll say, yep, we'll send our brush truck, and then they want to send 9 guys with it. And they say, well, hang on now, we don't need 9 guys.
Right.
The other problem we experience, and this is a problem every time we get into these larger things, whether they be local larger events or larger events where we might provide mutual aid in other parts of the state, is when we make that call from the county, or we put a page out to say we're looking for resources, let us, call us if you can fill the request. We have volunteers who will say, oh, well, I want to go to that, and they'll call their boss up and take tomorrow off, only to find out that we didn't need you. And there was some of that with this event, and it happens every time. And I know my answer is I'm sorry, but the incident management process and staff has determined that they need this number of resources, and we filled it already. And and then it's a tough challenge, and it's tough some days to marry the volunteer aspect of our local fire service with the career aspect of the forest rangers. Those guys when they come to an incident like this, they expect to work for 12 hours. They know they're coming to work at 6, and or at 7 in the morning, and they're here before that, and they're not done in the woods till 7 at night, and they're probably here after that. And in the volunteer world, we got that big letter V at the beginning. That
I might be
some folks can put 12 hours in, and other folks can't,
that's right.
and it's sometimes difficult to marry that together. In that the Rangers are looking for resources, and we're putting them in the woods, and we don't want to lose half of them at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We got to keep working. We got daylight. So it's a challenge, but that's something that we try to work through, and in the long run, it works out well. We pad our resources a little bit, and make up for losses as it happens.
And I imagine that meeting, that first meeting after the fire, Greg, you had an interesting meeting here at the fire station.
Our monthly meeting, yeah. We actually had Ranger Russell, Dave Russell, and Booth come out. Jared Booth, who's the local ranger for this area, and come out with a plaque and a nice map, glassed in and everything, and they wanted to thank us personally and gather everybody, including the auxiliary was here. So it was nice. It was very nice.
What was the final acreage? Did we have a count?
547,
I think it was a little bigger than that.
was it?
I'm gonna go back and remember.
Well, it's all right.
Actually,
I'll
it's on that
look.
map.
It's
over there.
actually-
We'll
on the
find out,
picture.
yeah. Somewhere between 550 and 600, I think, but,
More than we wanted. How's that?
yeah, well, not as much as the over 2,000 that was burnt in 1957. And I'm hoping to do a show on that with some people who are older than me even,
I've
so.
been looking for him. I haven't found anybody.
Nobody's older
I
than me
haven't
yet.
found anybody. No, not that. But
Haven't found anybody older than me. Well, keep looking, they're out there.
I have been. I've been asking people if anybody knows anybody.
Ellen Montgomery's helping me, so when Ellen's on the task, it'll get done. And, we have to look at, every morning we wake up, put on the national news, and we look at what's happening out west. And I think there was one fire, I looked yesterday, was 283,000 acres. So I said, how much is that in miles? And nearest I could figure, that's 21 miles by 21 miles.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge part of this county if it were 21 miles by 21 miles.
Yeah, without question. That's a, well, not quite a quarter of the county.
I would say,
It'd be a huge fire.
I'd say, well, if you go from the border to Plattsburgh, it's probably 21 miles or so, and
It's
then
about 24 from Plattsburgh to the
depending on where
border.
you are in Plattsburgh.
Yeah, depending on where you are. Yeah.
And then you head from the Lake Champlain to Ellenburg, and that's probably another 21 miles there. So you square that off, and that's a heck of a.
Yeah, it's a big chunk.
And there's so many of those going on right now out there. It just you're gonna count your blessings and say, this was hectic, but
For sure.
it could have been so much worse.
We didn't lose any property, no homes or structures, no lives lost, and one very minor injury at the beginning of the fire, but we were lucky and fortunate for sure.
Yeah, you see, as you mentioned on the news, you see these fires, tens of thousands of acres, a news story on any given night, tens of thousands of acres and 37 homes, or or not even lost homes, but evacuated. 10,000 people evacuated. Thank goodness we didn't have to evacuate anybody. We're lucky. We're lucky.
All right, anything else? We got pictures. We're gonna look at some photos and look at maybe some video online. It won't be as good as, I'll be shooting it off a screen, but I think people will get an idea of what the pictures in the video. Anything else before we go inside and start looking at that stuff that we ought to talk about?
I don't know if I could just, throw this out there, is just to thank everybody again, from the fire departments, from, Essex and Franklin and Vermont and Quebec and people that donated, just like we talked about. I just really thank you. It made a tremendous difference in our job, and again, it's nice being in a small community like that where people reach out and help. And I should thank the state guys too as well. They're paid to be here, but they do a great job, and without them, we'd be in trouble. So thanks to all the state agencies and some federal agencies were here as well too, right? With the helicopters and stuff. So yeah, I just think that we have all these people around here to be here and help for sure.
I'd echo Greg's comments, but I'd also add, Calvin, to thank you for documenting this.
For sure.
And everything else you document. Countless hours. You've made a life of it. So thank you for that and for documenting the things that we do in our business. It's good stuff.
Well, the first day I had a little more freedom. The second day I got escorted out by a forest ranger. But I couldn't argue with him. He's trying to do is make sure everybody's safe and so on. So I didn't argue with him. I just walked out.
Yeah, you kind of have to roll with that stuff.
You can't have all kinds of people roaming through your event out there.
And it's no time for them to vet, you from the next guy, from the
Right.
next guy, and
I had no problem with it.
I try to, we don't see you at structure fires and other smaller events very often around the county, across the county, but we see the news folks from the news stations, and if I see them and I'm not in the middle of something, I'll try to go, hey, come with me, walk with me, and I'd like to show you what's going on. Document it, get it out there for people to see. It's a good thing to people understand what's happening in the world. But yeah, sometimes things are big enough and it's hard to get that done, especially when there are other levels of authority in play.
I watched your video from the first
Yeah.
night, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, Calvin, that was a walk. You were up in
Yes.
there." Wow.
Well, Chris Trombley said he knew I came out, but he kept watching it as if like a movie. He'd say, "Is this guy going to make it?"
Yeah, right. He said that same thing to me. I laughed. That's great. That's good.
But yes, I made it out. So despite my asthma kicking in a few times with the with the smoke and so on, we made it.
Live to tape another day.
That's right. All right, we're gonna head inside, guys. Thank
Very
you.
good.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
All right, we're talking with Greg Spinner, the fire chief, and Eric Day, the Clinton County coordinator, EMS. All right, we've moved inside the fire station and a room where they relax a little bit here after a fire and have their meetings probably. And we got some pictures from, this is from the Forest Rangers, I would assume, Forest Service. This is the fire. This was dated the 13th. So this is probably what it looked like either on the 13th or the 12th. So it looks like an ugly version of Pac-Man, but it's not. And at the top up here is when the Brunel Road comes across and then moves down like this. Is that correct, Greg?
Yeah, the Brunel Road kind of ends right where the fire starts, basically, right?
Yeah, well, it kind of comes down to, it makes a turn there. You come down the Brunel Road and you kind of have to turn to go down that last segment there, and that's probably where it, okay, that's the first day. So the second day looks a little different. That's the second. This is the 14th, or 15th. That's the 15th. And here's one that dated the, let's see, that's dated the 15th also, okay. And this one here I think was the final one. Looks like a beached whale a little bit. This was the 18th, okay. And this was the report that they gave you a daily report, and this is a picture taken. This was on the operational report dated July 19th, but it may have been taken, I assume, before that, because by the 19th it was pretty much,
Right, probably just a picture that they had taken earlier, yeah.
yeah. So it is a dramatic type of photo, and you can see that those trees, as trees are, probably 30 feet or so, and the smoke and the flames are going well over 100 feet into the air. All right, we're going to look at some pictures on screen here, so we're going to get set up and come right back with that. So don't go away, because we'll be back instantaneously as far as the camera's concerned. All right, this is a series of photos that are online. It says Terry Spear, Altona, Flat Rock. So these are all from the same person?
She's collected them from different people, but Terry's one of our members, and a lot of people have donated their pictures.
Okay. This one here is donated, taken on July 13th, Friday the 13th at 1:54, the date, time. Okay, just skim through them. If we have a comment or something, we'll say it. If not, we'll just keep advancing every 15 seconds or so. Feel free to speak up if you've got
Sure.
something to say.
Just people starting to gather, all different state I can see, and just starting to gear up.
Yeah, we've got 150 of these photos, so we may just have some we won't talk about. Here's the news media.
And that was a press briefing we did on that Friday afternoon, with the Rangers, Assemblyman Billy Jones, the commissioner from DEC, was in that group, as well as, some folks from State Office of Fire Prevention and Control, State Homeland Security, the state police, myself, but the commissioner from DEC spoke at great length about their efforts in the fire. Captain John Strife spoke.
Okay,
And my own fire department in Tahoe.
there you go. All right. Moving right along. There's the Altona fire truck. Some of these will just speak for themselves. Here's a plume of smoke somebody took probably from their backyard.
It looks like from a backyard somewhere, huh?
Yeah.
Channel 22, Fox 44.
Yeah.
Another good shot of smoke. The clear days, some breeze, but not a lot of heavy breeze. But the altitude at which the smoke rose and stayed in that column was something to see on a couple of the days. Made for pretty high plumes before the smoke toppled over and moved horizontally. I still don't have pictures of it. I asked them the other day if they'd send them. The folks at National Weather Service in Burlington said that they were watching the smoke plume numerous different times on the weather satellite that crosses over the
Oh.
area every so often.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah, I got to get my fingers on those someday here.
All right, there's some firefighters and a bit of smoke.
And I couldn't tell you whose brush truck and then a DEC truck, yep, with fire in front of them.
All right.
That might have been part of the prescribed burn off the Burnell Road, I think.
Yeah, right there on Hard Road.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's prescribed burn. That's to kind of set your boundaries around the fire and set a little.
Take away the fuel, burn it off in a controlled manner rather than uncontrolled, obviously, yeah.
All right. This is something I unfortunately didn't get much video of, but you see these in the national coverage. This was very important in this fire too.
Yeah, water drops. The New York State Police had a couple of helicopters here with water drop capability. That's one of them in the photo. They flew numerous cycles for 5 days, 4 days, 5 days, and then for 2 or 3 days we had actually, in addition to the 2 state police helicopters, there were 2 New York National Guard Black Hawk helicopters from down Albany way were dispatched up here, and they brought water buckets that they carried that were actually bigger than the state police. They were capable. Black Hawk was a bigger helicopter, capable of a heavier load. They were dipping the bucket into. Correct me if I got to get the name right.
And initially, it was the Dead Sea.
The Dead Sea initially, and then Dead Sea, and then ultimately over on the corner of Devils down in the Turnpike in Minor Lake. So dipping water out of both locations. When they had 4 helicopters working at the same time, they needed another water source.
All right. All right. There's a good shot here of.
Yeah, good shot. I can tell you, that was Thursday afternoon. Probably Thursday evening, 5:30, 6 o'clock, and we were in the woods off the Rock Road where that camp is. Whose camp is that?
That'd be the Woods, Carl Andy Wood.
The Woods camp. We had gone in there with the Rangers, and the only reason I know that's because that's me with the yellow hat on the right. We went in with the Rangers, or actually the Rangers weren't with us initially. They told us, "Yep, follow this trail, go in," and we met some trucks coming the other way from Peru, and I don't remember where the other one was from, but they were going in the opposite direction we were, and politely told us that we should turn around and get out of their way because they were leaving. And it wasn't very long after that we had that discussion that this picture was taken, and I guess we understood why they were leaving, so we turned around and went with them.
Sound like a good idea. All right. Just a scene. That was right here. at the fire station?
At the park, at Feinberg Park, that was the landing zone.
Oh, okay, that's, okay.
Yeah,
Alright.
fire truck standing by there to provide coverage for aircraft in and out in case there was an incident with the aircraft.
Just a little briefing going on here under the gazebo outside the old barn.
We mentioned the morning briefing earlier in the segment by the Rangers. This is one of those briefings.
Okay. Just a picture in the distance of the smoke.
Yeah,
Another one of the,
that's one of the Black Hawk helicopters, all in a load of water. There's
close up.
there's a good shot of one of the state police helicopters.
Blades aren't even turning. That's a fast shutter on
I was
that
gonna
one.
say, yeah, the amazing work of a camera. That's at the LZ, I guess a different picture of that same shot before. Another shot of a plume of smoke. So that's one of the Feinberg Park, one of the state police helicopters on the ground with the bucket laid out in front of it, and a fuel truck. So state police aviation, they come with the helicopters. If they're going to be here for a lengthy period of time, they set up a heli base. So they were landing their helicopters here. They brought a fuel truck. They brought a crew along to do maintenance, minor maintenance if they need to. And there's a shot of the fuel truck, refueling that helicopter.
Okay.
They didn't have to fly back to Plattsburgh, which would be the nearest fuel at an airport.
Is that Jason?
I think it is.
All right. Jason Mayette won't
Can't
won't get on camera here, but I did get him that first day. I did bump into, he was one of the 15 or 30 people I bumped into out there. All right.
There's another shot of a state police helicopter working.
Yeah.
And there's
Nicole.
some of our friends from Canada brought their equipment down in a trailer. Shot of some fellas in the woods.
Some fire. A nice aerial view, and yeah, this was taken by, looks like a helicopter blade above it there, so it's probably one that somebody on one of the helicopters took.
I think I took that picture, actually, to
Oh,
be honest
okay,
with you.
I know you did
I
finagle a ride there.
I did. Again, when I said before about my time being better spent doing other things, I honestly felt my time would be better spent doing things other than flying over this, but I did get some good pictures of it. This was a pretty decent picture. I had a lot of people said, "Oh, it's burning. It's burning off in fingers in different directions." I suspect that the fire is actually burning between those as well. That those fingers, or the tips of those fingers, are bigger fuel loads that are making more smoke. It certainly doesn't spread evenly across, but when you look at the map, the maps that you showed earlier, those photos are the perimeter of the fire as generated by a ranger actually walking it with a GPS unit. So, yeah, it looks as if there's a spot fire over on the other side, and it's not. The fire is actually probably there all the way across between them. Another plume of smoke, I guess, in the distance.
Yeah. And West Shazy.
West Shazy, yep.
Alright. Another one at the pole barn. Okay.
A few members gathered.
Some of these, don't really need to say anything, but go ahead if you got something.
I was going to say, the check-in point, morning check-in, one of the biggest things that was stressed, obviously, on any operation, and this one is no different, is safety. But checking people in and checking people out.
Yeah.
If we put 150 people in the woods in the morning, we want to make sure we got 150 out. So that the big check-in sign is up there every morning, and there's one or two people assigned to do nothing but get everybody to sign in and sign out and make sure we have accountability. We're at more trucks around the fire station.
Now this is a dramatic shot.
Yeah. Some pretty good flame there.
Yeah. One of the staging areas that might have been down on the
Rock Road? No, that's the end.
end of
That's the end of
Burnell
Burnell Road, yep. End of Burnell Road.
That might have been on the And I don't know if that's on the Rock Road or Brunel Road.
Yeah, it's the Birdo Road, actually. That,
Birdo?
yeah.
Okay. That's right, Birdo connects to the,
Lion Mountain and Beekman Town.
when I first went to it, I drove by here and I turned up at the end of, at the corner up there at the, where Devil's Den makes, that's the Birdo, that's at that point.
Correct.
So I followed that down, so I didn't know if I was on Birdo or Brunel or which road I was on when I got to it, but I was on the Brunel when I finally got there. Okay. And the computer's talking to us here, and another news media gathering.
Media event.
Yeah. All right.
Not sure where that is. Rock, that's gotta be the Rock Road.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, Brunel Road, yeah, one of those, okay. Again, not every photo needs an explanation. There's some flames. And these are available on Facebook.
Yeah, the easiest place probably to get them is the Altona Volunteer Fire Department Facebook page. Again, one of our members, Terry, thank you, got them all together and allowed a lot of people to share them, and including the Altona Fire Department.
Oh.
Uh-oh.
Terry's all right, Terry's there.
Oh.
All right, what we had was the battery on the laptop faded away, but we're back, plugged in and ready to go, and looking at some more flames here. Lots of smoke. A helicopter shot. I assume some of these, like the fire ones, I assume some of the firefighters were able to get some shots in a moment of leisure.
A little bit of downtime, sure.
But they're working their garden here.
That's working a fire line, so a dozer had gone through and then they're raking any flammable material away to create a fire break.
I'm trying to remember on that first day that when I was walking out, and I think it was Dan McComb and somebody else from Busco had offered me a ride, and the first bulldozer was just coming in there, and that poor guy. That's very rough terrain to be driving a bulldozer over. In fact, I think out in California they had a bulldozer operator that perished.
Yep.
You know. All right. Different angles on the smoke. Everybody had their own view of it. Some firefighters. A little more intense smoke there, and there's some flames.
Yeah.
More flames.
That's a little bit bigger than I'm used to in Altona.
Yeah.
When the fire starts burning up and getting into the tops of trees and going from tree to tree up high like that, it's three-dimensional instead of,
Yeah.
almost two-dimensional on the ground. That's a different experience.
It's burning on the ground and it's burning in the air.
And that's when it starts making noise, and as you mentioned earlier, making its own wind and really living on its own. It's loud. It actually makes a relatively loud noise when it's burning like that in there. Another briefing.
More smoke. Thick smoke there.
Yeah, thick column. New York State Police.
There's an area that's after well, it may not have been after the fire, but it was after it burnt there.
I think that's up in the end of the Brunel Road.
Correct, yeah.
Actually up in the area that you had walked originally,
Mm-hmm.
and you and I had went
At the end,
later that week. Yeah, at the end.
the Caterpillar bulldozer.
Yeah, there's a few good shots of dozers around.
And there's a Jack Pine.
Helicopters were a big hit with the camera.
pretty neat. There's some water in there, if I'm looking at it correctly, the swamp.
It
and
looks a
it's
little wet, yeah,
kind of burning all around it and real close to it.
yeah.
If it's hot enough, I don't think the water slows it down much. It goes around it or over top of it.
At what point in time did you guys start to breathe a little easier, that you figured, well, it's just a matter of time before we get that final containment, that Saturday or Sunday, or?
I would say probably Sunday for sure.
Yeah,
Seem to be getting a handle on it.
things felt pretty good, I think, on Sunday.
Yeah.
The Friday morning was still pretty tense and through the day, and
Yeah.
Saturday was a big day with a lot of people, and still, there wasn't a very high percentage of containment. So, how much can we get done in a day? And then Saturday was a pretty good day because they had a lot of people working,
Right.
and we put a lot of people on the ground again on Sunday. And I think at the end of the day, Sunday, yeah, it probably started to feel a little better about it. And then the question starts to be, well, when is it gonna end?
Yeah.
Okay, we're doing good. When is it gonna end? There's a shot of the perimeter, and
That's kind of neat. You mentioned the jack pine cone, Calvin. There's a lot of people are understanding now that the seeds that are in that cone, that the cones don't open up until they get a massive amount of heat from a fire. So it takes fire for more growth.
It takes something to break them open, and then talking to Dr. Adams, Ken Adams, back in '98, and talking after this year here, after the ice storm, a lot of bulldozers went through different land down there, and minor flat rock, and driving over them helped break them too.
Sure.
But the normal course is extreme heat that breaks them open and drops the seed onto the ground. But the area where the heavy equipment went, he tells me that it got, there's a very close-up view of one of those. It, where the equipment went, it got very, 20 years later, it's quite thick there now.
Mhm.
So I'm sure this will spur the growth. And I guess the blueberries, from what people tell me, maybe not next year, but the year after.
Right. I was actually up on Sunday, and there was already some nice green fern growing where it had burnt.
Oh, it doesn't take long for nature to reclaim something.
there's one there, Greg, that I didn't notice until
The
the
Nature
last day.
Conservancy, yeah.
I did not know that they were here.
They used to own part of that property up there, and even though it says it's state, but I thought they owned the very first chunk off of the Burnell Road. But I could be wrong.
I've never seen a Nature Conservancy fire truck before, but apparently they own them. There was a crew here. It was a pretty handy tool from, I don't know whose that is, Sable Forks maybe? Yeah, Sable Forks. John Deere Gator or UTV, side by side. Those machines tended to be able to maneuver in there pretty well, where obviously our bigger fire trucks couldn't go.
No.
But even some of the pickup trucks, brush trucks were having a hard time. These things were pretty decent.
Well, and what happened was you'd bring your tank in and have that staging area, and then you would bring some water to another staging area, and then they had to come back and forth to fill up their little handheld tanks or the smaller ones like that there. So it wasn't like you got a big hose there
No.
on a fire truck fighting this fire.
No,
It was
it's
all guys with tanks on their backs and
small streams and actually, in many cases, not even water. Probably most people would be surprised to know that we use, small streams. We're not using big hoses like we do on houses. But in most cases, a lot of it is even without water. It's those pictures we saw with guys with hand tools look like they're working in the garden. Chainsaws, cutting trees, and working the bulldozer line. They used a fair amount of water with lines when they were doing the prescribed burns that Greg mentioned, to try to darken areas, burn flammable material ahead of the fire. So there were hand lines stretched and water sprayed to contain those small areas as they were burning them off. Water on the bigger fire, honestly, really is generally provided by the, at least initially by the helicopters. Once the fire line is cut, you know, there were, as you mentioned, brush trucks going in and out, bringing smaller amounts of water, because, yeah, there aren't fire hydrants up there, and we didn't lay big hoses like we do at house fires. So, yeah, a lot of work in small quantities.
Challenge to get the water to the scene.
Yep. It is that. I hope I'm not going too fast here,
No,
just say
that's
so
fine.
if I am.
No,
Some of them are repetitive.
yeah, it's self-explanatory. There's a burned out area.
Yeah.
Another Jack Pine. See, lots of people took pictures of those, so she's sharing, you know, but here's a burnt out area again.
The beauty of nature after something horrific, I guess, is the theory there, right? Big plume of smoke from a distance.
You can see that when I left work. It was bad.
I assume that's sunset. It could be sunrise.
There were a couple people on Lion Mountain hiking that were firefighters that were here a couple days later and said they could see it pretty clearly from up there.
Yeah. Calvin, we also encourage anybody that has photos that if they want to share them to the Altona Fire Department Facebook page, we'd be glad to have them and put them all in one big album. So
Sure.
that was the shot that I got from Jason Myatt at 12:44 on that Thursday.
This one right here.
That was the shot. Yeah.
That's the beginning.
That one needed no explanation. I knew exactly where it was and what it was. My view from the helicopter on Sunday.
You got to fly too, huh?
I did. Well, I was incident commander.
Well, yeah,
you
it's
know,
important that you.
Exactly.
They forced him to go.
Yeah,
Oh, Channel 3.
yeah. Jack Leduc couldn't show up though.
New York State DEC Emergency Management, New York State Fire. There's the State Police again.
Now, knowing that you can keep still scrolling through them unless there's something that you want to talk about as we see them, but knowing that there've been fires here in the past, as it get drier and drier, the possibility of this must have crossed your mind prior to it happening, I would assume.
For sure. We've here, and I think throughout the county, we always talk about, you know, quote the big one on the rock, and yeah, it's prone to do it. And I think the last time was 8 or 9 years ago. We had some good sized fire, nothing like this, that's for sure. But yeah, we internally definitely talked about it.
And you might imagine what it's going to be like, but until you experience it, you don't know.
Yeah. We've had smaller ones where, you know, we can take care of it with just a couple of local departments and deal with it, but nothing on this size. And
We're back around again here.
All right, we're back around
Yep.
at the beginning, so we're going to see if we can find some aerial footage that was taken recently. All right, I haven't talked to these folks yet, but This is my old friend Brian McBride. Who's Northeast Geospatial is the company name. And who's his partner, Eric? You?
A gentleman named Greg Dew.
Okay. And they've got a drone video camera ready. And they got several videos online. And you can see some interesting footage there. So just Northeast Geo Spatial, if you want to find that on Facebook. This is the video here showing some of the burnt out area and the edge of the fire.
So that's got to be the body of water we saw up off the end of the Brunel Road.
Probably
when I was up with.
Small area,
Yep,
small
yep.
little pond.
So he's flying kind of westerly, I guess.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can see the stark contrast between burned and not. Yeah, there's the water tower in the distance.
Yeah, it's unfortunate you couldn't have sent a drone in there once those helicopters started flying because safety concerns, but it would have been interesting to get a video from above of the actual fire going on. But for obvious reasons, you just couldn't have done that.
Yeah, the helicopters, we don't want to jeopardize them.
No.
And I'm concerned with the smoke, honestly, losing sight of the thing and not getting it back, having it come down somewhere on top of somebody.
So have either of you guys ventured back there since this happened?
Yeah, actually, we both have.
What
Yep.
day was that?
Was it on a Thursday that we
Was
went?
it
Wednesday,
Thursday right after the fire? So a week after the fire?
Sounds about
Or was
right.
it was a Thursday, a week to the day after the fire? We took a ride, both of us together, took a ride back. We actually rode the perimeter of the fire line on side by side.
That's not an easy trip.
It was not. What did we say? We went about, what was it, 2.5 miles?
Yeah, I didn't.
And it took us about 4 hours.
Yeah.
It was slow going in some places, very slow going. Yeah, rough terrain for sure.
Lewis and Clark might have turned around if they hit this kind of terrain.
Yeah, maybe would have ventured in a different direction. Try to pass it by. This is interesting up above. Where are we looking here, Greg?
Well, you just went by the same.
It's that same body of
Yeah,
water.
yep.
What is that up there?
That's an old Jeep trail. It comes off of the Birdo Road.
So that's wet naturally through there.
Yep.
So it just didn't burn there because it's wet.
Wet, and I think you started getting into some hardwood there too a little bit,
Yeah,
so it mixes it up.
The vegetation changes.
Mhm.
Makes sense.
So they've got several videos available at that site, and some photos too. He took some still shots, so it's an interesting little look of people that want to learn more about the Altona forest fire. We are back with Eric Day and Greg Spinner, and one of the things we have to point out is there was one other big emergency. Chateauguay had a huge fire, I think on Friday as you were doing this. But outside of that, there probably weren't too many big events that happened at the same time, which really could have thrown a monkey wrench in all this.
Yeah, countywide was throughout the week-long adventure here in Altona. There certainly were the normal everyday car accidents and broken legs and whatever other incidents we typically have on a routine basis. But we didn't really have too much else, which could have been a problem. The the fire in Chateaugay did tax the system a little bit that day, because there were obviously a lot of folks here working, and Chateaugay is, you know, for a big fire in Chateaugay, it wouldn't be uncommon for Altona to even get pulled into that.
Yeah. Because all
And,
the
and,
Ellenberg,
and,
both
and,
Ellenberg
and,
fire departments
right,
and-
Cherubusco, Ellenberg's, Moores, Line Mountain, and, you know, maybe over as this far, and that was certainly a big fire for them.
Yeah. Anything else, Greg? We should,
No, I think we covered a lot, and again, a blanket thank you to everybody that was here helping, and I hope the next one is maybe past my my years of being a chief here. Somebody else can do it next time.
well, we had the big one in 57, so that was at 61 years.
I'm
That'd be
good then.
fine.
I'll be all
Yeah,
right.
it's gonna be
Yeah,
61 years from
I'd be
now.
good with that too, 61 years, we can sit back and watch what they do and see how they did.
Yeah, we'll all be there watching.
I'm hoping so.
I know I won't be here in another
No,
61
no,
years.
but
If you're
I
hoping-
can hope for it though, right? 61 years from now, that
Greg may have a shot at it, but, you know.
advances in
Clean
medicine.
Okay.
All right, we've been talking about the Altona forest fire of July 2018, and we appreciate the coverage that so many people gave of this, and the effort that all the firefighters and other volunteers and everybody else we've mentioned earlier that put into making this a success. And as they've both mentioned, if there are more people that have footage, video, or pictures, send them to the Altona Fire Department Facebook page.
Sure, please, yeah, we'll
And,
take them.
I'd be glad to share them with the rest of the world.
Yep, absolutely.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thanks,
gentlemen. Thank you. You're watching Hometown Cable, viewer-supported local television. Thanks for watching.